and I'll be happy to uh, tweet it out and stuff.
Absolutely. Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and the MLB draft is right around the corner. Starts Sunday, and I couldn't think of anyone better to have on than Jim Callis from MLB Pipeline. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me, Jim. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the kind words. It's counting down. I guess as we record this, we're a little less than 4 days away from the draft. So
Yeah, man, it's got here in a hurry. Do you think this is kind of here to stay? This doing it on the Sunday before All Star break?
it's hard to say exactly because I think the commissioner's office is very pleased with the idea of having it as part of the All-Star game. I don't think anybody in baseball really likes having it this late. Like it disrupts trying to watch guys for next year's draft. It disrupts your normal procedures for evaluating players to make trades before the deadline. I ran into a general manager at the draft combine who told me that the general managers had voted 30-0 in favor of a June draft, having the draft back at some point in June. And he said he couldn't remember the last time 30 GMs agreed on anything. But I just don't know if that's necessarily going to matter. Like if it was in June, I think we'd be talking more late June because I don't think the combine's going anywhere and the combine's going to be in mid-June. But I think everybody in baseball would be happier, or I should say everybody with the teams would be happier if the draft was over, say, by the end of June.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like the hardest of the three major sports in terms of when to schedule it, right? Because you have the college season wrapping up during the minor leagues, in the middle of the minor league season, so the teams obviously want to get the guys out there. But yeah, I'd prefer it to be in June as well. But
I think all the journalists would agree with that too.
Yeah.
Like I think it would just because there's so much crammed. I mean, it's a very cool weekend in LA, but we've got the Futures game. If you want to look ahead to next year, there's a high school All-America game on Friday. There's a high school home run derby. There's the All-Star game. There's the home run derby. There's 15 games going on Sunday afternoon before the draft. Like, there's just an awful lot going on. Like if it were me, if I were in charge, I think what I would try to do is, and assuming, okay, we're having the combine, that's going to stay, is let's have the draft if the College World Series ends. The College World Series now is a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 3-game finals. Let's have it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I know the draft is on ESPN, so you couldn't necessarily have, the College World Series is on ESPN, so you couldn't have the College World Series games on MLB Network. But what if MLB Network went there for the final weekend, did some shows from there, pumped up the College World Series, led it into the draft? You'd have some players in the College World Series who wouldn't have to go anywhere. They'd be there for the draft. I think the fans of Omaha, have you ever been to the College World Series, James?
I have not.
Okay, it's my favorite event. I cannot recommend highly enough. But if you actually wanted, I think you would get fans in Omaha who care enough about amateur baseball who would go to the draft and be excited. I think you would have a really good crowd there. So that would be my idea. But I don't know that it's necessarily going to shift away from the All-Star game anytime soon.
No, that's a great idea. I think that you're right on the money there, putting it somewhere where you already have those fans out there. So, the guy that you guys have at the top of the MLB Pipeline draft rankings is Drew Jones. I think he's at the top of pretty much every rankings I've seen. Can you make a case for anyone other than Drew Jones, or is he in a tier by himself at the top?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. Like, he's, I think, the consensus number one guy. And I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of comps, but I use comps when I get them. I don't like to force comps, but he reminds everybody of his dad. I mean, he's that good. Well, I shouldn't say he's that good defensively because his dad might be the greatest center fielder of all time. But if you told me that Drew Jones won 10 Gold Gloves like his dad did, he's equipped. He can run. He has great instincts. He's got a great arm. He's an advanced hitter for his age. He's got some power. So it's a pretty good pay. He's the number one guy, but this isn't like a Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg, Adley Rutschman situation where it's, even though he's consensus number one, it's not like he's head and shoulders above everybody. you got to take him. Now, I would take him number one if it were me. Mike Elias has not asked me, but I would take him number one. Although, as your listeners, or a lot of them probably know, like you have this bonus pool system in baseball, which, if you go over your bonus pool by more than 5% in the first 10 rounds, you lose future first round picks, and nobody's ever going to do that. Nobody has. So you're kind of locked into what you can spend. So then it becomes a game of, if Drew Jones is going to cost me X, and there's other guys that I think are very close to him who might cost me $1 million or $1.5 million less, do I want to go that route and spend more on later players? Like I think you can make a case, if you were making a case not to take Drew Jones on ability, you could say, well, maybe I prefer an infielder, and Jackson Holiday is a potential 5-tool shortstop. So I think you can make a case for Jackson Holiday. I would still take Drew Jones. You can make a case. I wouldn't do this either. I wouldn't take Elijah Green, but you could make a case that Elijah Green has the highest ceiling in the draft. Now, he has the loudest tools. He also comes with more swing and miss concerns than the other top guys. But you could make that case. And I think you could make a case if you were a more conservative drafter and you wanted to have more certainty or less risk. Termarr Johnson is probably the best high school hitter anybody can remember in a long time. Like, I have trouble saying since who, because I have trouble coming up with who the last one was. I mean, he may be, in terms of pure hitting ability, the best high school hitter since like Ken Griffey Jr. Like way back when in 1987. It's ridiculous. I mean, I had one scout say he reminded him of Wade Boggs's plate discipline and Vladimir Guerrero Sr.'s plate coverage. Like, it's really ridiculous. Now he might only be a second baseman, but again, he might be Robinson Cano, so which would be pretty good player. So I think you could make cases, like you could make nonsensical arguments for those guys. If we're just talking about talent and not factoring in exactly what the price tag is going to be, I would still come back to Drew Jones every time.
Is there enough data out there, in your opinion, to kind of put those types of comparisons and those kind of comps on Johnson?
Well, I mean, you have to take comps for what they're worth. I mean, like it's funny because I think sometimes people read comps and they read like this is a literal exact comp. I mean, obviously no, because we're talking about two Hall of Famers who did what they did in the big leagues for however many years Wade Boggs and Vlad Sr. played together, and Termarr Johnson has played on the high school showcase circuit, and right now he's playing in a college league as a graduated high school senior, like a second-tier college league, the Suncoast League. So I mean, no, like there's not enough data. Like, I mean, that with any of these comps that anybody throws on any of these amateur players, if you want like legitimate, statistical basis for that, no. The thing is, I actually don't love comps, but I love, like, that one. I was just like, wow, that's like an incredible thing to say. But like, comps were basically, I think, started to be used way back when we didn't all have the internet and video on our phones and TrackMan data and all this stuff. And you were trying to paint a report when you're off filing reports from the middle of Oklahoma as to what this guy physically looked like. So you'd say, oh, he looks like Johnny Padres, or whoever. He looks like Wally Moon. And now I don't know that the comps really matter as much, because nobody, like, as fans, I can pull video up on my phone. I can go to YouTube and find video of all these guys doing things. So, the teams have, all kinds of video archived on these players. But yeah, I realize it's ludicrous, but well, the fans love comps, James. You got to give the fans some comps.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to nitpick the specifically, but more just kind of, with a prep hitter and the hit tool and the level of confidence you can have. Because I mean,
no, it's the hardest thing to project, I think, is hitting, especially for a high school hitter.
Right, like Mickey Moniak, Jared Kelenic, like
those are good ones. And a fair point, like Mickey Moniak. Like, I don't know how many people admit it now, but people were putting 70s on Mickey. Now, nobody was saying Mickey Moniak was the best high school hitter in like 20 years or anything like that. But like Mickey Moniak, 70 hitter. There were guys throwing 70s on the bat, which is really aggressive on a high school bat. And I don't know if all those guys would necessarily admit it now. And yeah, I mean, I still am baffled by Kelenic. I mean, best high school hitter in his class, good numbers in the minors, and he gets to the big leagues and he's striking out a ton. So yeah, it's it is scary. And you asked me who the best players in the draft, and I gave you 4 high school hitters there. That's what kind of draft this one is.
Well, for me, that's really exciting because the upside is there where you can really kind of dream on those top 4 guys. You mentioned Jackson Holiday as a potential 5-tool shortstop who hits from the left side. Obviously, has the bloodlines. I mean, what type of offensive output could you see him kind of developing into? And it sort of seems to me almost like he's kind of just scratching the surface. As he's kind of filled out, as he's kind of started getting to more power. Do you have anything to add there about Holiday?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair because I mean his dad was obviously a very physical player, and Jackson has made tremendous strides this spring, and I think he's continued to get more physical. And what's really impressive about him is like we put grades on all the players on our draft top 250. And we do that based on industry consensus. It's not me with a stopwatch on every guy or anything. Like we try to do a good job on the grades, but at the same time, our grades are not the most precise grades, from 30 years of scouting and all, grizzled veterans and all that. Like they're not the most perfect grades. But I can't ever remember taking a player. We did this with Jackson Holiday this spring, where we increased his grade in every category: hit, power, run, arm, field. Like, there are guys who get better, like not nearly so, but Gavin Lux was kind of like that. But still, we didn't make Gavin Lux better in all 5 categories. And it's funny because so coming into the year, like Jackson didn't have a great summer last year on the showcase circuit. Like I think the general consensus among people was good player, maybe a little more famous than he should be based on the summer he had. He was trying to hit a lot of home runs and chase too much and had some swing and miss issues. And I think, if people are being honest, they tell you they thought he was a second round pick. That was a consensus in the industry. He was a second round pick coming into the year. And that's not the consensus anymore. Like he's gotten bigger, stronger. He's throwing better. It used to be like Kenny State shortstop. Now I wouldn't say he's winning a Gold Glove, but nobody's questioning is he staying at shortstop. He's looks much better at the plate. Granted, it's against high school competition, not showcase competition, but he's looked tremendous. And like you kind of hinted at there, I think he can continue to develop physically too.
So I listened to your most recent podcast with Jonathan Mayo, and so I think I might know where you might go with this question, but on the DraftKings Sportsbook.
I don't know. Like I'll just caution you here. Like I'm not our MLB's gambling policy. I'm not supposed to offer expert wagering advice. So I'll be careful here. Go ahead.
Okay. Hopefully I don't listen to this one, but Drew Jones is minus 190 to be the number 1 pick. Holiday is plus 400, and Termarr Johnson is plus 500.
You know what's interesting though? Like somebody sent me. We may or may not have had some internal discussion. Keith Law came out with a mock where he had Brooks Lee going number 1. And somebody sent me odds where all of a sudden Brooks Lee was like the number 2 favorite to go number 1. So I don't know if the odds have shifted. What do you have? Like Brooks Lee was ahead of Holiday and Termarr Johnson. And my comment was, it's crazy because this isn't the NFL draft or NBA draft where you have all this, all these people covering it with a lot of knowledge and talking to people. And I jokingly suggested, like, I could just make something up and say, hey, I think Justin Crawford's going number 1. And it would probably affect the odd. I would never do this, but I was saying like if I wanted to bet on a guy, which I cannot do working for MLB, if I wanted to bet on a guy, I could just come out with a mock and bury the guy, like have him go 10th in the first round and drive his odds up. Like I think like it's amazing to me that like odds are that reactive to whoever's latest mock came out. But anyway, I interrupted you because we were having an interesting discussion about this earlier today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually don't have the page up anymore, but I mean, when I checked, an hour ago on DraftKings, it was the top 3 were Jones, Holiday, Termarr Johnson. I didn't see any up on FanDuel. I don't know if they had him and took him down, but
somebody had Brooks Lee as like the number 2 guy earlier today. Because and I think because Keith had had him going to the Orioles in his latest mock. But yeah, I will say, to steer away from straight gambling discussion, on our podcast that you listen to, I pointed out the Orioles, and Michael Elias did this with the Astros too. There's no upside for the Orioles to tell people who they're picking. Like
Right.
a lot of times the team picking one will tell the team two, and you'll get a sense of it. But they've narrowed it down to 5 guys. I really think it's more like 3. And they're going to take those guys right up to the time when it's time to make the pick to see how little they could sign each of those guys for, and then they'll make a decision. Okay, based on talent and price tag, this is the best value. Like so on our podcast, I said I'm just torn between Drew Jones and Termar Johnson. I went 33% Drew Jones, 33% Termar Johnson, 30% Jackson Holiday, and I went 4% Brooks Lee. So it's tough, and like I, I just don't see him taking Brooks Lee because I think his profile and Termar Johnson's profiles are very, very similar. And I think Termar Johnson is going to cost less. So if you have 2 guys who are very similar talents and projected probably the same position and the same profile, I'm taking the guy who's cheaper if I think they're the same guy or close to the same guy. So that's why I don't think it's Brooks Lee. But any of the other 3, you can take the best guy in Drew Jones. I think Termar Johnson would cost the least to that group. And I think Jackson Holiday is a little bit of a compromise with both. He's not going to maybe not quite cost quite as much as Drew Jones, but he's also a very, very talented player.
So I think in your mock, might have been last week, you mentioned that Elijah Green has kind of been sliding a little bit, and then you mentioned earlier just about teams being a little iffy on the swing and miss. You guys have him ranked 3rd. I mean, the tools, like you said, are incredibly loud. The upside's really obvious. Is this just an instance of teams maybe being just risk averse and not wanting to really mess up a top 5 pick, or is it about the teams that are picking in the top 5, or why do you think that is that Green is sort of sliding out of that discussion?
Yeah, and it's more like he might slide because again, it's tough because we really don't know what the Orioles are doing. Like if we knew what the Orioles are doing, we could kind of have a better idea what this top 5 was going to look like exactly. And we actually talked about that in our podcast with 4 different guys going number 1, what the rest of the picks would look like. I thought with Elijah, the thing that helps him is he plays at IMG Academy, and they play a good schedule. They play a better schedule. They face better pitchers. They face Brandon Barriera, who's a first-round talent, than most guys are going to face in high school. Like I'm in Illinois. Like if you're up here playing high school ball, you might face a couple guys all spring who are throwing 80 miles an hour. So if you had worries about my bat previous summer, I'm not going to do anything playing for New Trier High School that's probably going to change your mind. But Elijah faced good pitching at times this spring at IMG, and he was better. He made some improvements. So I think there's less concern. And I think it's not so much – it's more just the way the draft works. Like it sounds like the Pirates at number 4 are going to do what they did at number 1 last year and take a good player, but they're also looking for a discount. They're not going to pay full freight at 4. They want to save money they can spend later in the draft. And, last year we saw the teams at 1, counting the Pirates, 1, 5, 7, 8, and 9 all did discount deals. And that pushes guys down. We saw Brady House go 11. We saw Khalil Watson go 16. Interestingly, neither one of them's having a very good year right now in the minor leagues. And so I don't think it's so much that, Elijah hasn't really done anything to hurt himself. I don't even think it's that the team, like, I never thought Elijah Green was kind of the Orioles type of guy. Like I just don't think they're going to take a high school guy with some swing and miss risk. I think that the Diamondbacks and the Rangers, they'd be more apt to take him than the Orioles. But I think it's more a case of, so I don't think he's going to the Orioles at 1. I think the Diamondbacks, like everybody knows Diamondbacks love Drew Jones. So if he doesn't go 1, I think Drew Jones goes 2. And if Jones goes 1, I think it might just be Jackson Holiday 2. I think Green could go 3. It's like kind of him versus Holiday versus Parada and Brooks Lee, depending on who's available. I think he could go 5, and it's probably him versus the same guys at 5 for the Nationals. But then I just don't hear him at 6 to the Marlins, 7 to the Cubs, 8 to the Twins. Then you start talking 9 to the Royals, and then it things can get weird too, because if there's a guy who people weren't expecting to get into the double-digit picks, they may have already plotted out, we're taking this guy, and then we're going to spend this in the second round. All of a sudden, here's Elijah Green, and he might cost more, and you're making decisions on the fly a little bit. So I'm not sure that he's sliding, but of those top 4 high school guys, if there was one of them who didn't go in the first 8 picks, it could be him. Termar's interesting too. I think Termar could go 1. I think he could go 4 on a deal to the Pirates. And then, he could go 6, 7, 8, but Termar could could go 8th potentially. So I think there's the two guys who are pretty solid. I feel like Drew Jones is going 1 or 2, and I feel like Jackson Holiday is going 1, 2, or 3. And then I think on any of these guys, the college guys like Brooks Lee and Kevin Parada, whoever, they have some homes up around 5, and then they have homes down closer to 10 too.
Do you get the sense that Green's going to be more expensive than Termarr?
I think it's weird because you don't hear that. We don't hear all the numbers. I think the way I might put that is, I feel like it might be tougher to get a discount based on where you pick him, or if he slides, he might have expectations of getting picked as if he were taken higher than Termarr would, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know their price tags, but I think it would be easier to cut a deal with Termarr. Like, I do think there's some thought that Termarr wants to go 1-1, and that he might be a little bit more amenable to a deal to make that happen.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna have Drew Jones ranked 1 from this class for fantasy, and I'm really tempted to put Green up at 2 because of the tools. And I guess, like, where are you at sort of on how is the athleticism going to age? Like, how do you see the body kind of aging? I mean, he's just so big. I don't know if he reminds you of anyone. I mean, he doesn't remind you of anyone at that same age.
Well, I was going to say, like, athletically, like, again, I mean, this is why bloodlines, like, I think do matter in baseball for a couple reasons. One, not that he doesn't have baseball bloodlines, but like the guys with baseball bloodlines, like a Jackson Holiday, or like Drew Jones, these guys have been like taking reps in big league batting cages when they're 6 years old, and I do think so much of hitting is just repetition and getting at bats, and having a dad who knows what you're doing, and you're around the big league ballpark, and the hitting coach is messing around with you a little bit when he's got spare time, and like, I don't think it's any secret we see all these, there's a ton of really good big leaguers whose dads played professional or Major League Baseball. But I would say from an athletic standpoint, Elijah Green's dad was Eric Green, who was kind of ahead of his time in a way, is this like giant but yet athletic tight end. There weren't too many tight ends built like Eric Green back in the day when he was a 2-time Pro Bowl tight end. And so I do feel pretty good about the athleticism, aging well. From a fantasy standpoint, it's interesting because, again, I mean, that's what makes this stuff fun to talk about, even when guys are just, minor league prospects, not even draft. But like, I mean, Elijah Green might be a 30-30 guy. Termarr Johnson's really going to hit, and I do think there's power in there. Like, I think it's at least average power. But from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know that Termarr's going to steal you a lot of bases. And steals are always hard to find. Jackson Holiday might be a 30 home run shortstop. I don't think he's going to be a big stolen base guy either. But yeah, I mean, if you factor in how hard it is to find steals, and Elijah Green's a plus runner, and he can hit. I mean, he has big time power. I think Elijah Green's got the most raw power in this draft too. I don't think there's anything wrong with going Elijah Green as the second best fantasy price. It's like anything, like whether you're investing in the stocks, you're investing in fantasy baseball players. Sorry, I get my baseball phone ringing there in the background. But it's just, there's more risk involved with Elijah Green, but he might have the biggest payoff of anybody. So it's just, how comfortable are you with that risk? Termarr Johnson, I feel like there's less risk because, even though we brought up Mickey Moniak and Jared Kelenic, like, it's hard to imagine Termarr Johnson not hitting. But so there's a little more safety there. It's just kind of which way you want to go. And then, like I said, Jackson Holiday might be a 30 home run shortstop, and he can really hit too. So there's a lot of ways you could go there. And if you want less risk too, you could always go the college route with a Brooks Lee or a Kevin Parada or Jacob Berry or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to kind of nitpick on those 4 prep guys. Let's get to the college guys though. I mean, you mentioned Brooks Lee. He's the one of the kind of top college guys on your rankings, on most rankings. He seems like the one that you can sort of bank on a little bit of defensive utility. Whereas
maybe I like Brooks Lee. I don't think a lot of guys necessarily think he's going to be a shortstop at the big league level. Like
Well,
you might be talking second base.
sure. I guess I meant kind of compared to Jacob Berry or Jace Young. I don't know how
Yeah, that's fair.
Kevin Pareda behind the
Yeah.
dish, but like if you were just looking at like Lee, Pareda, Berry, Young, let's just like cut it off at those four. Is Lee's offensive output like above those guys? Is it kind of the same tier as those guys?
Yeah, I mean, like, so I think to me, the top three college guys are Lee, Parada, and Barry, depending on how you want to stack them up. And, from both a real life and a fantasy talent standpoint, Brooks Lee is probably the best pure hitter in college baseball. And I think there's going to be at least average power. I think we have Termarr Johnson, a half grade better hitter than Brooks Lee. And Brooks Lee's proven it at a higher level. Grew up around the game. His dad's a coach. He's got an uncle who's a first round pick. Maybe he winds up at second, but like you feel better about him staying in the middle infield than say Jace Young. And so I feel like there's a high floor and also some ceiling there. Barry's interesting because I feel like I like Barry a little bit more than the industry does, just a little. To me, I think it's the best combination of hitting ability, power, and plate discipline of any of the college guys in this year's draft. He crushed it at Arizona. He crushed it at LSU. He doesn't strike out. Now, I don't think he's a third baseman. He might be able to play the corner outfield. I think he's got a better chance to play the corner outfield that people give him credit for, but it's not a lot. And then he might be a first baseman. To his credit, and I would want my guy to say this, it kind of reminds me when Kyle Schwarber won to catch. Like Barry, there's been interviews with us, with other people, where he said, I work on my defense. I'm going to work hard. I think I can play third base. I want to play third base. He doesn't buy that he doesn't have a position. Like he wants to prove people wrong. And like, it's kind of refreshing in a way because like now it seems like so much of it's like, what can you do at the plate? And a lot of guys don't work on some of that stuff. So we'll see. I mean, desire isn't, you still need to have the ability. So I'll call him an outfielder, but like, I really like the bat. But I will say like the data teams too, his exit velos were not as high compared to the other top guys, which was kind of puzzling people. Still had a good year, still does a lot of damage, but the exit velos were kind of like, would have thought they would have been more than that. Prada is he's an okay catcher. I think he catches well enough to stay behind the plate. His arm's not very good, but people don't run that much anyway. So he's going to stay behind the plate, and he's going to hit for power. Now, I could see if I was lining these guys up for fantasy, I think just in terms of overall production, Brooks Lee's a safer bet, and I believe Jacob Berry's got more offensive ceiling. But when you factor in that Prada is going to be a catcher, I might put him ahead of those two guys for fantasy purposes, just because it's hard to find catchers. And then Young was with those guys, I think, coming into the year. Young was probably ahead of Prada. It was probably more Lee, Young, Berry coming into the year in whatever order. And had another good year. He got pitched around a ton. He didn't try to do too much. But he also, like, he played hurt a lot. He was banged up. He was not running well. Even before that, I think there was some question, is he really going to stay at second? Like, I believe in the bat, and I believe in the batting eye and the power. I just, he might want to be an outfielder in the long run. So I would kind of put him. The guy who's interesting, and he could go in the top 10 picks, is Zach Neto from Campbell. It's not a power conference, but Zach, hit 402 this year at Campbell, played well in the Cape Cod League, can play short, really good arm. When he pitches relief every once in a while, and he's up to like 93, really controls the strike zone. Pretty decent power too. So like if he's, assuming he stays at shortstop and he produces like you think he can produce, and he's going to probably go in the first, 7 to 15 picks because of the positional value. Like I don't think he gets talked up as much as the other guys. And then you also, Gavin Cross is the other college hitter who probably goes in that tier. He's an outfielder. He's pretty good. He was the best hitter on Team USA last year, the college team. And then Chase DeLauder, who's kind of like my personal favorite, but he never really played a complete season at James Madison because of COVID. And then they played a half season last year, and then he got hurt this year. I really like his combination of athleticism and size and tools and really good plate discipline. He got eaten alive. They played Florida State, which has really good left-handers. He's a left-handed hitter. He got eaten alive in the first series of the year, and I think people hold that against him a little bit. But he was really good in the Cape Cod League last summer. And it's kind of weird because, like I said, he's never played a full season. He's got like 3 kind of 20 or 30 game chunks. but I think he might have the best all-around tools in the college class. So he's kind of in that second tier, like toward the end of that group. He's probably going the 10 to 20 range. He's interesting too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, DeLauder is huge, and
Really good athlete too. Like he's like 6'4", 6'5", but like run, throw, hit, power. Look at his strike at the walk numbers are tremendous. Yeah, I thought he coming into the year, I thought he was kind of my. I wasn't saying he was going to go number one, but he was my sleeper pick. Like this guy could work his way into that conversation, and then the Seminoles destroyed him the first week, which hurt him some, and then he broke his foot in April and missed the second half of the year. So and I know there's this taste in some teams' mind that the best pitching he saw all year ate him alive. Although you could argue, look, pitchers are often ahead of hitters, at the start of the season, whatever. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But that's kind of, I think you got Lee, Parada, Berry on that first tier of college hitters, and those other four guys kind of on that second tier.
With Neto and DeLauder, the Cape Cod League performance obviously is something that comes up. How good was the pitching that those guys were facing on the Cape?
I think it's like as good a pitching as you're going to see in college baseball. I think more guys go there than they necessarily go to Team USA, with Team USA playing a reduced schedule now. I mean, you could almost make the case. You could. I find myself asking that question about just guys this spring because so many of the top arms got hurt that. I went to Georgia, so I love the SEC. I believe the SEC is the best conference in college baseball. But you look at how many SEC teams had their best pitcher hurt, and it's like the SEC numbers aren't like, it's hard for me to like reconcile like what does that mean with Peyton Pallette hurt and Landon Sims hurt and Connor Prelip hurt and Blade Tidwell hurt and then inconsistent when he came back. Like, what do these numbers mean? Because and I could go on and on. One guy I should have mentioned, and it's weird because I don't know if you want to count him as a high school guy because he's 17 or as a college guy because he went to Chipola. But Cam Collier's super interesting too. He's got bloodlines also. He's Luke Collier's son. But he kind of did what Bryce Harper did without as much publicity because he wasn't on the cover of Sports Illustrated or anything. He should have been a junior this year in high school, but he reclassified to the 2022 draft. But that wasn't enough. So he went to Chipola Junior College, which is as good as any junior college program in the country. He played pretty well there. But that wasn't enough. So he went to the Cape Cod League at age 17, which is like he's the youngest player since Robert Stock. Like it's got to be like the second youngest guy in the Cape in like 50-something years. And he's a really good hitter too. Probably sticks at third base. Non-zero chance he has to maybe move to first or left field. But he can really hit too. He'll go in those top 10 picks somewhere. And he's pretty interesting too. Like somebody said, if he was an international guy, he'd probably be getting $3 or $4 million. And he probably is going to get $3 or $4 million in the draft as well. But he just popped in my mind when we were talking about the Cape Cod League. And I never know, like, I think of him as a high school guy because he's 17 years old, but I guess technically he's a college guy because he went to Chipola.
Yeah, it's hard to think of the youngest player who's going to get taken on day one as a college guy. I was going to ask about him next. I mean, he's just, with him being so young and having this, such an interesting kind of path. Are you guys are projecting like plus hit, plus power on him down the road? Is it kind of?
Yeah, I think he's got that upside. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that's a path that we'll see more guys follow if he goes, top 10 and like, or is it just that he was special enough to pull it off?
I think he was special. I mean, I really admire what he's done because it's like pretty crazy. I mean, Bryce Harper was like a unicorn. I mean, he went to like a wood bat junior college league and hit 31 home runs and was just insane. And Bryce Harper's insane. But no, because I mean, honestly, like you take some risk there. Like, what if he went to Chipola and didn't play well? Then like you either have to go back to Chipola next year to be draft eligible, or he was a Louisville recruit. If you go to Louisville, you're not draft eligible for 2 years. And I mean, the easy play, and this is why I admire what he did, and he did well, is like he could have just stayed in his Georgia high school and destroyed that competition, and everybody still would have been excited because a lot of teams really are into age on high school guys, and he would have been a 17-year-old high school guy who should have been a junior, kind of like James Triantos last year with the Cubs, who like I'm bullish on. A lot of people are bullish on. He reclassified last year just because he wanted to go attend North Carolina early. He wasn't even thinking about the draft, and he blew up, and he's young, and guys are comparing him to David Wright, and everybody loves James Triantos. Like, you could still achieve the same effect and get paid by just crushing high school competition. But I think it's a credit to him. It's like, well, I know I'm going to crush this high school competition, so I'm going to go to, like, arguably the best junior college program in the country and see what I can do. And then that's not enough. So you know what? I'll go play a couple weeks in the Cape against some dudes who are 4 and 5 years older than me in some cases and see what I can do there. So yeah, I don't think it'll be a trend necessarily. Just like the kid, Brandon Barriera, who I mentioned with Elijah Green, the high school pitcher from Florida, who shut himself down in April rather than risk injury. I don't think that's going to be a trend either. I like you may have these outliers who do stuff like that. Just like Carter Stewart going to Japan. I think ESPN or somebody's like, oh, this could be the new trend. Well, Carter Stewart's not pitching that well in Japan. He's not going to command a bunch of money when he comes back. And I haven't seen any other draft guys clamoring to go to Japan when they're 18 years old. So I think Cam Collier is just an outlier. And I think he had a big league dad, and I just think they were looking for another challenge. My hat's off to him, because it's unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable that you would do that. Like I said, you got Bryce Harper and you have Cam Collier, and then he goes to the Cape Cod League too. That's pretty impressive.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and get some messages from our sponsors, and then I'll ask Jim about a couple more of my favorite hitters in the class. All right, we are back with Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline. Jim, I'm a pretty big fan of Jet Williams, the prep hitter from Texas, and
you and every scout I've ever talked to, Jim. Just seen him.
And I also like Drew Gilbert from Tennessee. And the reason I'm kind of lumping them together is because they're both, 5'8", 5'9", respectively. Do you get the sense that that's being held against them at all, or are teams very willing to take guys that are that size in the first round?
I mean, I think he gets held against, say, Jet, in the sense he's listed at 5'8", and where he's 6 feet tall. Like, I think we'd be talking about Jet Williams maybe going in the 10 to 15 range instead of like 15 to 25. But everybody really likes the way he thinks he can hit. I think the question is, when you're that small, is how are you going to hold up over 162 games? Like, just athletically, durability wise. But guys love Jet. They love his makeup. They love his bat. I think he's going to go really good. I mean, he might even go. He could sneak. He could maybe go 14 to the Mets. Drew Gilbert, same thing. Like, Drew Gilbert had a really nice season at Tennessee. Not the biggest guy in the world. It's interesting who goes first, him or his teammate Jordan Beck, who's another outfielder. And Jordan's kind of your classic. He gets compared to Hunter Renfroe a lot. Beck does. You're strapping, big, physical, athletic outfielder. The one thing, I mean, guys like Gilbert, the one thing I think with him, I more than his size, I have teams like that needs to play under control a little bit more. He was kind of out of control in the super regionals, got ejected, made a terrible base running mistake when they were losing in the game. They got eliminated in. He's pretty volatile, and guys are just like, look, we like guys who play with emotion, but that guy needs to tone it down a notch. I think I hear that a lot more than I hear worries about him being 5'9". Also, but again, I mean, like I was saying with Jed about holding up, if you're going to play, I guess to put kind of with over the top emotion, 162 games a year, you're going to wear yourself out, especially when you're not a big physical guy. But I think Joe Williams will definitely go in the first round, and Drew Gilbert to like 20 to 40. I don't think people are too worried about their size.
Yeah, that what you're saying about Gilbert, I have sort of got almost like Tommy Pham type of vibes from him, and I've heard a Lenny Dykstra kind of comp in terms of just sort of playing with his hair on fire, that type of stuff. So
yeah, I mean that's a good trait, but it's just like, I don't mean to pick on Drew Gilbert, but a new number two assistant, you can't, when you're in a super regional game, scream expletives while looking at the umpire, and he can see what you're doing, and everybody in the crowd knows what you're doing. And then you're astonished you get tossed, which comes with a 1-game mandatory suspension in a best-of-3 series. You can't do that. Like, that's out of control. And then, like, it wasn't the reason they lost, but they were down 3 or 4 runs to Notre Dame in the final game of that super regional. He was on first, and the ball got away in the dirt a little bit from Notre Dame's catcher. And that's it. We all know. And look, I'm not claiming like I'm Mr. Baseball. I would never make a mistake on the diamond. But you're down by 4. You're not the tying run. you better make sure that that's you're no shot you're getting thrown out. And he got thrown out. I think it was the ninth inning. You just can't do that. And I did have a number of teams bring up to me, like Drew Gilbert, but like that was not a good display in the Notre Dame series.
Yeah, no, I mean that stuff does matter for sure. So that's definitely good to kind of point out. With Jet, I apologize if I missed you saying that, but with Jet, do you think he's a shortstop or center fielder?
Maybe like it could go either way. Like he had an injury last year on the showcase circuit, so he wasn't throwing well, and I think guys doubted it. And it's funny because like this spring when I've asked guys, they're like, he might have to move to center. And I'm like, well, I always ask, is it, what is it? Is it not good actions or hands? Is it not enough arms? Not. He's definitely quick enough. I think the arms more average than plus, so that would probably be the biggest detriment. But I think he's got a shot. So I think definitely will be one of those. Whoever takes him will run him out there at shortstop for the first year and a half of his career, and then figure out. But I could also see him at second base too.
Okay, let's get to the pitching. Initially,
there's a reason we've waited this long to talk about the pitchers. So.
Well, initially when I first started kind of getting into this class, I wasn't excited about getting into the pitching, and then there are guys with pretty obvious upside. It's just that they all come with so much risk. Who are the candidates to be the first pitcher selected, and what's the earliest you could see the first pitcher coming off the board here?
Yeah, it's just been a strange year because we've had at least 6 college. Sorry if you don't know if you can hear the dogs going nuts in the background. I don't know if we have a Amazon delivery or something going on, but we had 6 college pitchers who were potential first-round picks who either had Tommy John surgery before the season or once the season started. And then you had Dylan Lesko, who was the best high school pitcher and the clear favorite at one point to be the first high school pitcher or first pitcher of any sort taken. And he had Tommy John surgery. And you also had Cole Phillips, high school kid in Texas, throwing 100 miles an hour. Everybody's all excited. And he had Tommy John surgery. So it's just been decimated. I think the consensus best completely healthy pitching prospect is Brock Porter, a high school kid from Michigan. Now, the industry doesn't love taking high school right-handers high in the draft. I feel like he could maybe go 9 or 10 to Kansas City or Colorado. I think it's more realistic. He goes in that 11 to 14 range to the Mets, Tigers, Angels, and then the Mets pick again at 14. But you never know with high school pitchers. They can slide a little bit sometimes. And, the way the draft works, you might I don't think he's going to slide in the 20s, but like somebody who might slide in the 20s, you might get paid more in the 30s by a team with multiple picks and a higher bonus pool than you're going to get it, like say pick 21 or something. So I think Brock Porter is the leading candidate to be the first pitcher taken. I think the first team that everybody thinks is definitely taking a pitcher is the Angels at 13 after they took 20 pitchers last year. And it's, and I think it's a combination of things. I think, we talked about all those hitters, and I think almost all of them are going to go. The other guy we didn't mention was Susac at Arizona. Real quick with here, he's an offensive-minded catcher, better defensively than Kevin Parada. I totally saw Daniel Susac slipped my mind, but we should include in that group. But I think almost all that group of hitters we talked about are going to be gone by the time pick 13 rolls around. And I do think the Angels want a pitcher. And I don't know if they pay full freight for a pitcher. I hear Cooper Jerpy's name there a lot. He's an Oregon State lefty. It's kind of an unconventional look, but the fastball is great carry. He led Division I in strikeouts. Like he's got all the advanced metrics on the fastball, like the induced vertical and the spin and all that you like to see. So I could see there's a scenario where Cooper Jerpy maybe goes 13. And then the wild card is Connor Prelip, who would have been a candidate to be a number 1 overall pick, perhaps. Had a great freshman year. Granted, it was 4 starts because of COVID. Got hurt in his first start last year. Had Tommy John surgery May 2021. And he didn't pitch this season. He threw a bullpen before the SEC tournament in late May. And he threw a bullpen at the draft combine. And that's been it. It's kind of the Cal Quantrill path when Quantrill went 8th overall in the draft after not pitching coming back for Tommy John. But Cal Quantrill had a full freshman season, whereas Prelip had a COVID reduced freshman season. But anyway, Prelip, has, I think, the best slider in the draft. And he's throwing. The nice thing is his Tommy John's behind him. He threw these bullpens. If you sign him, he's ready to go out and do whatever, as compared to some of these other guys who had Tommy John this year who you're not going to get back till next year. And I think Prelip's got the best slider in the draft. He, 92, 95. He's always thrown. Well, I say he's always thrown strikes in his 30 innings of college baseball career history. You hear his name a little bit with the Cubs at 7, with the Twins at 8. So maybe he, makes a nice closing rush and sneaks past those other guys. But Prelip could be the first pitcher taken. Those would be my 3 best bets to be the first pitcher taken, I think.
Yeah, all these guys, either coming back from Tommy John or just having had Tommy John. Have you gotten a sense, from teams, like in terms of are there certain teams that are just still kind of very wary of going that route? Or are there teams that, think of it as almost an opportunity to buy low on a guy they really like? Is it just kind of all over the map from a team standpoint on taking these guys that are injured right now?
I think it varies from team to team, James, but it's more the second. Like the track record of guys coming back from Tommy John versus shoulder is pretty good. And you can look at recent Walker Buehler.
Mm-hmm.
When he went in the first round, everybody knew he needed Tommy John. Lucas Giolito, when he went in the first round, everybody knew he needed Tommy John. Guys generally come back. Now it's not a guarantee because Brady Aiken went in the first round after having Tommy John, and he's probably never going to pitch in big leagues. He didn't bounce back. But yeah, I think most teams feel like, guys are going to come back from it. But it's crazy. I mean, I've written this week at our site. It's the most confusing pitching draft ever with all these injuries and trying to figure out who might go where. Like we might see, there might not be a pitcher taking the first 12 picks, which has never happened in the history of the draft. We might see, I don't know, 24 hitters taken out of 31st round picks. It's just tough. And then it's even funny. So like you have this separate subgroup of guys who were hurt but have come back. I mentioned Connor Prelip. You've got Cade Horton, who was a big-time dude in high school, went to Oklahoma to play both ways and maybe play quarterback. And he got hurt. He had Tommy John before he threw his first college pitch, so he missed all of last season. And he came back as an infielder initially this year, started pitching at the end of March, had like a 7.84 ERA in the regular season. And before the Big 12 tournament, he's trying to add a cutter. And that didn't work, but it led to this eureka moment with his slider. Now he's got one of the best sliders in the draft, and he was unbelievable in 5 postseason starts. So Oklahoma almost won the national championship in large part because of Cade Horton. And then you have Kumar Rocker, who was the 10th overall pick in last year's draft, one of the most acclaimed pitchers in NCAA history. He does a post-draft physical with the Mets, who had agreed to sign him for $6 million. They don't like what they see. They reduced their bonus offer to $0, just a formality so they could get the 11th pick this year's compensation. And his medical records came out recently. It was revealed he had shoulder surgery last September. And I don't want to get into too many specifics, but I have talked to a number of teams about his medical records, and there's still some risk with Kumar Rocker. It's not, I know there was a quote in an ESPN story from his advisor saying, basically, minor scope, we're all good, he's pitching great. I think teams are a little bit more cautious than that. And he threw well in abbreviated stints in independent ball. So anyway, you have these 3 guys. So these guys are back, but they still have questions about them. And it's funny. I could talk to 3 different teams and like, are these guys going before you? Like I'll talk to teams in the middle or even end of the first round. These guys going before you, and I get different answers. Oh, I think this guy could go in the top 10. This guy I wouldn't touch. This guy's going after us. And I'll talk to another team, and they'll give me a completely different perspective on all 3 pitchers. There's no consensus on where those 3 guys should go in the draft. I would think Prelip goes first. I would take Horton first or second, but he's only in his second year at Oklahoma. He's got a lot of eligibility remaining, and there may be a high price tag involved there, which makes it a little difficult. Like he may want a certain amount of money, and then Rocker. But like on any of those guys, if you told me any of those guys went in the top 10 or any of them went in the second round, it's all in play. Like I don't know what to make of any of those guys.
Yeah, I like the way that you phrased it as the most confusing pitching class ever, because
it's not even close. I mean, we literally I guess even if we take Prelip out because he's back throwing bullpens, there's 6 dudes who had Tommy John surgery who would have been first round picks who had Tommy John surgery since last offseason started. Not to mention those three guys I just mentioned, not to mention Carson Wisnant, who still, I guess, could be I don't think he will because Jerpy will go ahead of him. But Carson Wisnant was the top healthy college lefty coming into the year. And he got a season-long suspension for PEDs, which, he says he just bought an over-the-counter supplement. Who knows? But he got a full season NCAA suspension. And you got to watch him pitch a couple times in the Cape Cod League, but you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I make of this? I didn't get to see him all year either. Like it's just crazy.
The guy that almost comes with the fewest questions to me is, you mentioned earlier, Brandon Barriera. Like I love.
Well,
okay.
Yes, but I think teams want to know, what does it mean? Like, you shut yourself down. Like, I think teams have grilled him pretty hard. I'm not knocking his decision, but if I were a team, I would ask this, and I know teams have asked this, like, what does it say about the kid that rather than going out there and trying to win and compete and be with, win a title with his, friends on the team, he's like, hey, it's all about me. I'm shutting it down. So, like, there are some teams that have questions about that, whether that's fair or unfair. So there are no easy answers in this draft. Brock Porter's easy. Like, he's a high school righty and Barriera's a lefty. So, like, Brock Porter, outside of being a high school righty, like, well, even Brock Porter, you could quibble and say, like, he pitches in a league where the game every batter starts with a 1-1 count. So, like, what does that mean? When you can touch 100 and you've got a filthy changeup and a hard slider, and guys already started that bat with one strike against them, what does that mean? But he's really good. But yeah, Barriera, if you're leery of all these injuries and you're afraid of high school right-handers, I didn't mean to cut you off before, but yeah, you could argue that Barriera maybe that leads you down that path.
Well, Brock Porter is kind of the exception that proves, in the class. Like,
it's hard. Yeah, it's just that's what the draft is. And, like, even with the lefty, you got Barriera on the high school side. You got Robbie Snelling from Nevada. You've got Jackson Ferris, who's also from Florida. Like, I could see those guys going, like, a couple of those guys going in the teens, but I also could see getting to a point where then maybe it makes more sense. You try to push, if I'm a team with a big pool, I try to push Barriera into the 30s and scare the teams off in the 20s with smaller signing pools and smaller, pick allotments for their top pick. So, it's not impossible. Barriera could be I guess there's a scenario where maybe the Angels take Barriera at 13 and he's the first pitcher taken.
So I want to ask about a couple guys, just in terms of their repertoires. You mentioned Cooper Jerpy. The fastball has the great traits, but side armor, and I don't think any of his secondaries get much faster than 80 miles an hour. And then Landon Sims, who has the monster fastball slider combo and kind of a big TBD on the changeup. Do you have anything to add in terms of where you see the changeup for Sims and the secondaries for Jerpy going?
Yeah, Jerpy's got, like, one of those, like, low slot kind of sweeping slurve, like, not a bad slurve, but a good slurve, like the positive connotation slurve type of things. But it's not your traditional, over the top, overhand curveball, or I think if you like it, you could put a 55 on it. But it's not. I don't think it's a plus breaking ball necessarily. And then Sims is funny. So, Sims has great fastball, great slider, and he had Tommy John, so we got to see him for 2 and part of a third start this year. And so I remember when we were doing stuff in the fall, like, he didn't pitch in the fall. And I remember asking scouts about the same thing you just asked me, like, how good's a changeup? They're going to start him. And like, it was just all anecdotal because he didn't throw his reliever. And everybody's like, well, we talked about it, and he has confidence in his changeup. So that was like in the fall, the report was Sims is confident in his changeup, like he's going to throw it, because, like, you did get to see him throw a fall ball. And so I think it looked like I don't have a pocket. If I could pop up Synergy, like he threw 2 starts and got hurt in the third, so he probably threw, I don't know, 15 or so innings. So, like, maybe he threw 15 changeups. So we still, it's all like anecdotal evidence on the changeup. I think I remember asking guys about. I remember asking guys before we knew he was hurt after his first start. How do he look? And then when he got hurt, that was what I asked. Like, what'd you get to determine on the changeup? And I feel like I feel like people feel it's viable. Like it's going to be at least a viable changeup, and he could start. But again, his track record as a start was 2 starts, and then he got hurt in his third. So we'll have to see. But yeah, it's those are reasonable questions on both guys, I think.
So let's finish things off here with just you mentioned Cade Horton as a potential signability risk. Are there any other guys, any guys from the prep ranks where you could see a surprise go to college type of guy or anything like that? Any high risk signability guys?
I'm just gonna look down our list, and like I just heard that like Horton, may want upper half of the first round money to sign. Just scrolling down here because like when we line up our list, it's based purely on talent. Like the signability does not play in. Still scrolling down, bunch of college guys. Andrew Dukanich pulled out and he's going to Vanderbilt. I don't know. Like I could see, maybe one of the high school pitchers. Like there's only so many high school pitchers who can get paid in the draft. So maybe well, I'll give you one. If I had to bet, my best guess on the best player, not counting Andrew Dukanich, who's already pulled himself out of the draft, I'd say Noah Schultz, the Illinois high school lefty. Didn't pitch much this spring because of mono. I think he pitched 5 or 6 innings. I know Twitter got super excited about him when his first 2 innings of the year when he touched 96. Like Capan was really spotty, and I could see him winding up at Vanderbilt. So he might be my best bet, to the most likely candidate for me. And then my guess is, as it gets closer, this is what's happened the last couple of years. Excuse me. We'll have some more guys pull out when they realize they aren't necessarily going to get, the bonus offer they wanted. They'll just pull out like the day of the draft, or sometimes you see guys pull out after the first day when they don't go. This year, the first day is 2 rounds instead of 1, like it's been the last couple of years. But if they don't go in the top 2 rounds, they're just like, okay, I'm out. So we'll probably see more guys pull out as it gets closer.
I lied. I have one more question.
That's fine. That's fine.
On Kumar Rocker, could you see? I really hope this doesn't happen, but could you see a team drafting him and really kind of lowballing him, kind of given that he just really doesn't have a ton of leverage here?
Theoretically, you could do that. And I'm with you. I'm rooting for Kumar Rocker because I know he chose not to take a physical, which would have, or pre-draft MRI last year. The rules are different. He chose not to do a pre-draft MRI. Had he done that, it would have guaranteed him 60% of his slot. So he would have been even though he agreed to 6, slot was like 4.8. So I think that comes out to about 2.8, 2.9. The Mets would have had to offer him at least $2.9 million, or they would not have gotten this year's pick as compensation. And Kumar might not have taken it, but the rule, the union bargains the draft, even though the draftees aren't a member of the union until they get put on 40-man rosters. And it's just a terrible rule. The union should be ashamed of what that rule was last year, because it you take a post-draft physical, and clearly there was something wrong with Kumar. The Mets didn't make it up. The Mets wanted to sign him, but the pre-draft physical is solely determined by the team's doctor. It's not like the doctor, you get the physical and you're like, we disagree, we're going to get a second opinion. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever, in that case, the Mets doctor thought was all that mattered. And with most pitchers, I think you can look at anybody's arm and be like, there's some wear and tear. We don't like it. So anyway, rule's different this year. And anybody who is invited to the combine who takes a complete physical, not just an MRI, hitters and pitchers, is guaranteed 75% of their slot. Now, Kumar did not. He was invited to the combine, didn't attend. He was playing indie ball. There's opportunity for people who would have had conflicts that they couldn't attend the combine, could still do a physical. He did not take a physical. So once again, if whoever drafts Kumar does a post-draft physical and doesn't like what they see, all they have to do to get the pick back next year's compensation is, again, offer him $0. So yes, from a cynical standpoint, I could take Kumar, let's say I take him with the 25th pick in the draft. Say, Kumar, we're offering you $1 million. The slot there is more in the mid-2s. We're offering you $1 million. And if you don't like it, you can go back, play independent ball again next year, and take your chances next year on the draft. Nobody's going to do that, though, because one, nobody wants to bargain in that kind of bad faith with a player. Um, it just would set a horrible tone for the relationship to begin with. Um, I, I mean, this would be further down the line. Let's say Kumar Rocker becomes a star. Kumar Rocker might just say, when he gets to free agency, screw you. Like, I'm gone. You guys totally abused me because you could. So like, I'm not staying here. Plus, the X factor is his agent is Scott Boras. I don't think anybody's gonna like when you look at all the good
Okay.
players that Scott represents, both in the draft and in Major League Baseball, that you are going to antagonize Scott Boras just to save, $1.5 million because you can on Kumar Rocker. Like that just seemed like now again, I do think a lot of Scott's guys, these big time free agents, are going to go to whoever offers them the most money. But at the same time, I just don't know why why you would risk angering Scott by screwing over Kumar Rocker just because you could, just to flex your muscle. Hey, you've got no leverage, dude. You're going to just take what we give you. I don't think that would be received well by the Boris Corporation, and that might affect your ability to land some of his players. Like I know at the very least, if I were Kumar's agent and somebody did that to my client, I might just say, well, like in the future, when you want to meet with my player, when you want to, do whatever, no, you've lost all access to my players going forward. 29 other teams can do what they want, but my dude will not be talking to you. My guys will never talk to you again. So like that would be awful, and it would be it would be a bad look for baseball and the team that did that to Kumar. So, but the good news, as you said, I cannot imagine that would happen.
Yeah, really, really pulling for Kumar.
I'm with you. He
and
won't get 6 million, but like that guy took the ball every time at Vanderbilt, won a lot of big games, pitched on short rest. I'm not saying Vanderbilt ran him into the ground or anything, but he pitched on short rest, multiple occasions, came up big, gutted through some stuff last year. The rule was not a good rule, and he got burned. And so I hope he comes out of it with at least a nice bonus this year and stays healthy and becomes the star that a lot of people thought he was going to become.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. Before I let you go, is there anything you want to kind of plug that you guys got going on before draft night?
I'll throw in a couple quick plugs. We're going to have all kinds of coverage on the draft, on the futures game, on the high school All-America game, on the high school home run derby, the All-Star game and stuff, of course, which I don't even think about because that's out of my arena. At MLB.com, we've got scouting reports and videos on the top 250 players in the draft. We've got more mocks coming. And the nice thing about our site is everything's free. We're obviously there to, MLB.com is part of the goal is to promote the game of baseball. And all our stuff's free. So you can check all that out, all the videos, all the scouting reports. It's all there for you. And then personally, I know so Jonathan Mayo will broadcast the high school All-America game on Friday. And I hate to say this because I'm not involved with the game. I think it's on MLB Network, but I'm not sure on that one. I will be broadcasting the high school home run derby Saturday morning on MLB Network. I'll be broadcasting the futures game Saturday night on Peacock, and then it'll play again Sunday morning on MLB Network. And then Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, both Jonathan and I will be part of MLB Network's expansive draft coverage. So there's a lot going on in the next few days.
And Sunday, the draft coverage starts at 7 Eastern, correct?
The draft starts at 7 Eastern. We usually do a pre-draft show for about an hour, just setting things up, and that'll start at 6 Eastern.
And then go ahead.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
What time does the coverage start on day 2?
Day 2 and 3, it's at 2 Eastern. I was gonna say, I have this fear. I'm sure I'll get it figured out, but like we talk about the times in terms of Eastern time for TV, but we're gonna be on Pacific time in LA, and I live in Chicago, which is Central time, so things occasionally get goofed up when things get communicated to me in Eastern time, but they don't tell me it's Eastern time. I think it's Central time, so I have this great paranoia. Like when I'm gonna wake up late and realize, wait a minute, like the draft's already begun and I'm still in bed or something. But yeah, it's I have the Eastern times memorized, and I will synchronize my watch properly when I get to LA, hopefully.
Well, always love talking draft with you, Jim. Keep up the great work, and I'll be
Thanks.
along with the coverage. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, James. This is a lot of fun. A lot of good questions. Yeah, it's. I think this is going to be one of the more unpredictable drafts we've had recently. So it should be a lot of fun to see how it plays out.
Absolutely. This has been the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'll be back next week to recap everything that happened with the draft.